afternoon. The May 25th, 2021 board workshop is now in session. Today we will have a budget update provided by our Chief Financial Officer, Cynthia Lisinski. Pam, roll call please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mrs. Jenkins?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Present.
And Mrs. Campbell?
Present.
We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Ms. Lisinski.
So good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, and Dr. Mullins. Today we're going to talk about the impact of the FEFP conference report and the impact of enrollment. Bottom line up front, because of flat state funding, because of reduced enrollment, and because of unfunded mandates, we're starting right now with a general revenue shortfall of $16 million.
Thanks for hitting us with the good news.
It's going to be a great day.
Well, it only gets better.
But we have a plan.
We do.
We do have a plan. These are our district priorities, and we use this as a guide for all of our resource decisions. And just to make it known that this is the conference report, it still has not been signed by the governor, so it's still subject to veto. All right, so we always use this FTE slide, and that's because an enrollment problem is a money problem. And the state provides funds based on our enrollment, and for every full-time student, we will earn a base of $7,691. If you take a look at the last 4 years, you can see that we have not grown. We have lost enrollment, while charters and scholarships and other options have increased slightly. Now with the pandemic, we had a significant reduction, and you know, it's understandable. So we lost 3,732 FTEs because of the pandemic, but the good news is the state held us harmless. The state is not going to do that in this conference report and next year. So when you look at 21-22 projections, you can see that we're growing, are projected to grow, but from a lower level. And right now, the difference between next year and this past year prior COVID, the Calc 2 projection, we are 2,770 FTE below pre-COVID projections. And if you just did the simple math, that would be $21 million in funding. So because of the uncertainty of student projections this year, the state did create a reserve, and which is very unusual for the state. Normally, if you grow above your projections, then there's a proration that you get at the end of the years. But the state, knowing that there's such uncertainty in enrollment this year and next year, I mean, the projections were, we did the best we could, but you know, everyone's kind of in the same boat of trying to figure out what happened to the missing kids and are they coming back. So in this case, they put a reserve in there, so there's an incentive to grow. There's an incentive to get these kids back enrolled, and that we can just make some money back if we exceed our projections. So there's a carrot there. It's actually an incentive to even grow further, and that's what we need to do. And so this slide is a picture of what I just showed you, or a visual. So over the next 3 years, we really need to gain back enrollment. And if we're not able to gain back enrollment, then we're going to have to reduce our footprint. And so these are the highlights from the state conference report. So this is state level. The base student allocation increased by $53. Now the base student allocation, that is the discretionary dollars that the districts are allowed to use. And so any increase in BSA is really helpful to the district, so they can put the funding to where the district's priorities are. The teacher salary increase allocation, the state increased that from $500 million last year to for additional $50 million with the goal of increasing new starting teacher pay to $47,500. Currently, we're at $46,550. So this will help continue to increase that pay, and that was the goal of the state. The state also increased mental health assistance by $20 million. It eliminated the funding. They eliminated the funding compression categorical, which is not helpful to us, because that categorical actually helped districts like ours, where the FTE funds per FTE were less than the statewide average. So every year we received, close to $1 million in that allocation. So that was removed this year from the calculation. And then the class size allocation reduction, that caught all the districts off guard. That was a significant reduction, and you'll see that later in the slides. The enrollment growth reserve, like I mentioned before, a positive thing in my opinion, that we can grow and exceed our projections and not worry about being penalized at the end of the year. The Gardner Consolidation Reserve, that's really more competition than we've ever had, with increased school choice vouchers. So we'll have to see how that works, but that could potentially work counter to us increasing our enrollment. The next bullet is the emergency order funding adjustment. So the $681 million was what the state used for the hold harmless. That's how much it cost them. And then in ESSER 2, you'll see later on that, I don't know if you remember, but the House wanted to write legislation on the ESSER 2 and have a little bit more control over the funding, and they kind of won the day, and they got that. So they tied legislative mandates to ESSER 2, but they're all good things for kids. So I don't think that will be an issue, and it'll be more like a categorical. So for district-wide, I went through some of this again. Now, Chris Moore, when she saw this slide, she said, you have to put the zeros behind the 16 million, and you have to make it really big, or you have to say it a lot. So the reduced enrollment and the flat state funding creates a shortfall of $16 million. And then you can see our BAS increase is $55. The teacher salary allocation, you can see that. The funding compression was 831,000, excuse me. And then the class size allocation, that was big. That was $7.9 million that we were not expecting. Other things that we need to be concerned about is the textbook adoption. Now, we did receive the funding for textbooks, but that only funds about 40% of what we actually need, and that's a district-wide issue. The legislature's going to increasing FRS rate, and that's projected to be $2.8 million. Enrollment growth. And again, I mentioned that several times about the withhold, the reserve the state is going to have so we can continue to grow. And then the expansion of vouchers can potentially result in further enrollment loss. And again, we talked about the ESSER 2. And to be fair, in February, we forecasted $20.7 million shortfall. And that's what we projected in February. And that's what we were preparing for. And so the $16 million, is better than what it could have been. I think there was just so much excitement that we actually thought it was going to be even better than it is. But the state really did. They held us harmless this year. They allowed us to navigate through educating our kids through a pandemic, and we had financial stability. So that was really pretty amazing that they did that. And this year, next year, they're going to fund us at our enrollment. And I think it's fair. We're going to have to do our work and get back to where we were and even better. But the state, it's fair. We're doing better than what we had originally projected. This slide, you can see the base student allocation. It's about $55 per student increase, and then that gives us our BSA, which, like I said before, is our discretionary funds. It's kind of the base for each student is $4,321. So, that was our growth in discretionary funds. And then you can see down on below where it was a little deceiving when, though I think it was advertised that the state increased funding by $38 per pupil. Here you can see that you really have to compare it to the second calc where it was the projection pre-COVID, because that's where our funding is right now. And then if you go over to next year, there's a slight increase of $11.74. All right, so this slide walks you through the funding, and the total state funding is a negative $25 million. If you look at the net of the categoricals, you'll see the BSA, and the BSA grew $2 million. So the $2 million is what grew for discretionary funds for the district, and that could be used to offset the FRS, most of it. However, in reality, that has been crowded out by other mandated requirements that we have to cover. But the local funding, that we get from the property tax rolls increased $9 million, and we'll get another projection one May, so maybe it'll get a little bit better, we'll hope. So bottom line, again, we're starting at negative $16 million. And this slide just shows you the categoricals and how they were funded. And then here we go with this class size reduction. You look over to the box on the left, and you'll see that the total reduction was $7.9 million. The charter share was $1.1 million. So that 1.1 you'll see in the next slide that can offset some of our bills. But and then you look over to the right top box, you'll see that the big reduction was pre-K through third grade, where historically it was funded around $1,300 per kid, and it was cut by $317 per child. Fourth through eighth grade increased $52. Ninth through 12th grade increased $53 per child. But again, the pre-K through third grade was something we weren't expecting. And, these funds are used to fund classroom positions. 5.5 million of that was due to legislation, the decisions that they made, and 2.4 of the reduction is due to reduced enrollment. And so, 7.9 million reduction is equivalent, just to illustrate, 7.9 million is equivalent to approximately 151 teaching positions. Again, it creates an unfunded mandate in order to maintain our class size.
Yeah, I want to jump in on this one because, as Ms. Lasinski referenced, this caught everyone off guard. It was a very unusual. They have not adjusted the class size allocation, at least like this, as long as we can remember, at least as long as I've been looking at it. To the point that I raised it at a FADS meeting I was at a couple weeks ago to have FADS folks look at it, namely Jim Hamilton, and my fellow superintendents were all struggling over what was the rationale, and then even perhaps more importantly, what is the long-term implication of this? Because was this a legislative adjustment for 1 year because of declining enrollment to, I'll say, over account for the disproportionate number of fewer students in the pre-K to third grade level? Or is this a long-term funding reduction likelihood? If it is, then as we recover our enrollment, we're going to be funded at a lower rate, particularly for the classes we're targeting to recover our enrollment from in that revenue recovery. So there is a lot of question around the state as to what the intent and what the long-term implications are of this particular item. But we're already, if you will, although behind it, we're a little bit ahead of it in trying to understand and plan for what are the implications years out as FADS tries to sort that out for us. So certainly keep the board apprised along the way. And Cindy, I know, is in ongoing communication with CFOs around the state as well, as we all kind of, we are adjusting for it this year because we anticipated a reduction in revenue, but the question remains, what happens as we recover that enrollment? So we'll keep you posted.
Okay, so this slide is our unfunded mandates, our district must pay bills, and potential revenue offsets. And then you can see on the top left, I called it the enrollment gap. So that's $16 million. And what we had planned to do when we thought the risk was going to be even higher was to hold the classroom savings from the funding that we saved because we didn't hire as many teachers because we didn't have the enrollment to support those teachers, or for the teachers to support their enrollment. So there was savings there, so we're using, and that's a one-time saving, so we're going to put that towards the 16 million. And then we're projecting to have a 7.1 million in savings next year because of the same reason, because we don't believe that enrollment's going to be back to where it was previously. So the 8.9 and the 7.1 is going to cover, or the plan is for it to cover the $16 million gap, budget gap. So we got that done, covered. And now we have state new mandates. We have the Florida retirement rate that is going up. 2.8 million is our estimate. And then we have the first bit of the minimum wage increase of $887,000. So those are two must-pays that we have to cover. And then when you look at Brevard's must-pays, we have a health insurance cost increase that we still need to get our arms around and get that healthy again. And I think this 6.1 will do that. And then we also have the SROs. We have increase in costs. So altogether, we have a $10.1 million must-pay bills that we have to cover with recurring dollars. And so then you go over to the right side and take a look at the recurring savings, and we had 2.1 million in recurring savings, and that came from, we had an overprojection in our FRS last year. There was 400,000 that we were going to put in for healthcare when we were through negotiations, so that's part of it, and there were some other things that fell out. So we have some recurring savings of 2.1. Our estimated retiree lapse, 2 million. And then we really dug in on our district funding. And so we did a 10% reduction on our discretionary funds. And, this is probably the third or fourth year that we've been hitting the district's dollars. And they really are, I can't see going much further because we don't want to break things. We don't want... but we did get $700,000 for that, but I wouldn't expect to get that kind of money again next year. We also took a reduction of school reserve units, and that was 6 units. And that was based on taking a look at how much funding was held in reserve for reserve units. And then I noticed that, over the years, we've left some money on the table. So what I proposed was to take some of that money that we left on the table and use it at buying power up front, but then just remember we won't have it fall out at the end. So we're going to be reducing our lapse by putting that up front. And the same thing with the district positions. Those are prolonged vacancies that we took. Again, that's going to take our vacancy, our lapse rate. So we're going to put that buying power up front, but then, we're going to have to watch how we're going to cover those must-pay bills at the end of the year. 68.3 looks like a lot, but keep in mind that about 55 of those are bus drivers and bus riders. Taking a look at vacancies, it's been very, very difficult to fill the bus driver positions, and I think it was like 50 that we just at a time is always vacant. So we took 25, and then we'll see if that's the right number or not. And then bus riders, the same thing, and then we took 25% of the district reserve, and that's the only budgeted reserve the district has. And so we have a 600,000 reserve that's budgeted, and that's it for the district, 600,000. So we reduced, it was 800,000, and we took another 200,000. And then you'll see that charter school share, and that goes back to the previous page where the charter schools are paying 1.1 of that class reduction. So the recurring savings that we were able to come up with was 7.8 million, and that doesn't get us to the 10.1. So this isn't the time to cut teacher positions or instructional positions. This is the time to accelerate learning. So to steal Dr. Mullen's phrase that I liked, it's to survive and thrive. And so we're going to keep workforce stability of 30 positions. And what we're doing with those are we're going to fund them for ESSER. ESSER's, we got 3 years. So as we recover and get our enrollment, we will take those positions that are funded by ESSER and put them back in the baseline as we recover. But there's absolutely no thoughts of cutting any of those positions. We're just funding them a different way to be able to balance our budget. And then this bottom line I do like, because I have to remind folks that this is just a projection. This is a forecast. It's not money in the bank. It's not revenue that's been collected. So this is this is a plan, and it's based on revenue and expenditure projections, so but I actually think it's a pretty good plan. And then this slide shows you the one-time funding requirements, or the non-recurring requirements. The very top box is the continued must-pay end-of-year requirements. It's almost, reoccurring one-time payments, but the first one's for health insurance, 3.1. The second one is the workers' compensation. You may remember that one last year was 2.9. It's usually much higher. We were able to get that down this year. And then when you go down to the must-pay requirements, we had some prior year cleanup that we had to do. We had a proration. And what that proration was is we were held harmless. However, the part of the deal was districts will be held harmless. However, the districts that grow, Commissioner Cochran felt that they should be rewarded because they actually grew when everyone decreased. So for all the districts that grew, they did a proration of funding from all the districts that declined in enrollment. So our share was 1.5 million. There was scholarship growth from family empowerment that we have to pay. Because we're a pass-through for the charter schools, it was only right to hold them harmless as well. There's an unemployment cost, and the Brevard after school, they normally transfer $2.3 million to Fund 100. However, because of the pandemic, they're not going to get there this year, and so we're projecting that we're going to have to cover 1.3. Again, that's a projection. It could be better than that. And then we have the emergent requirements. We have to do some healthcare infusions one time, one in June, one in December, and then you can see the rest as you go down. But those are total one-time cost of $22.1 million. Now, we will have a larger fund balance than normal, and that will, we're looking to give you a projection on what that fund balance will be. It's very, very early. We normally don't do that for another 2 or 3 months, but I think it's important to be able to project out the best that we can what that fund balance will be to see what we can cover.
Ms. Lisinski, let me jump in here and just highlight a couple things. If you go back up to the middle section, the must-pay requirements, one of them is the unemployment for 0.46 or $460,000. If you remember when we presented that a few months ago, I believe the projection was approaching $1 million at the end of the year. If I remember, it was 0.9 million. And I mentioned that because our folks did great work in submitting corrections to the state and getting that reduced, getting that cleaned up. Dr. Thetty and her team got on that post-haste, and we've reduced some of that additional cost, but we're still approaching now $500,000. And then I also want to highlight Brevard After School. Our early projections of Brevard After School participation projected that we would not recover any of the $2.3 million in revenue for the district budget. But Dr. Ivory, who is the director who oversees our Brevard Aftercare program, she dug into the budget day one, looked at allocations and staffing rates, made improvements right away, did some shifting of program impacts across our schools, and promoted the program, if you remember from the presentation that she made a couple months ago. And we've narrowed the loss of revenue to the district side by $1 million over the course of the year. So just want to call out great work on behalf of the team that they've done to put us in a better position than we might have otherwise been.
Okay, and this is a slide that shows the historical budget cuts that the district has taken over the years. And then so now,
That was way too fast.
was it too fast?
You know I'm not going to let that opportunity pass by.
Okay.
Huh. If we just pause for a moment and let this get our attention. For now the 6th year in a row, the district has reduced operating budget expenses by no less than about $3.5 million, and as much in that one year of almost $13 million. But cumulatively over the last 6 years, we've reduced our operating budget or expenses by over $38 million. I don't, it's not a sustainable process. You can see we, last year, it was 8 million. This year, Ms. Lisinski, presented accurately that we're to the bottom of the barrel in terms of trimming reserves and trimming budgets to our departments. I mean, we are a lean, mean impact machine. And we're hitting the critical mass of not continuing to be able to cut our district budget. We have transferred everything that can be transferred to the capital budget. There is nothing less. I think if I ask Ms. Strickland one more time to go back and look again at transferring what else can be transferred to the capital budget, she might pull out any of her hair, and because we've looked probably no less than 3 or 4 times just in the last 12 months. So I just think it's important for our community and our taxpayers to know we have been extraordinarily vigilant in digging within and continually becoming increasingly efficient. And on the backs of the men and women who provide support and service to our kids and our families across the district, we virtually have eliminated very little service or opportunities for our kids. And that is a testament, not that we were fat, it was just our teachers, our staff, our maintenance staff, they say, okay, if we have to do more with less, we'll find a way, because they believe in the cause, they believe in our mission, and they believe in our kids. And it's, so just, I thank you for the few minutes to highlight, if you will, I don't know, or maybe low light, the reality of what we have worked towards over the last few years, and just commend our team for continually looking for ways to meet the requirements. So thank you.
Okay, now we're going to switch over and talk a little bit about ESSER funds. And so with one of the largest infusions in our nation comes great responsibility. And we need to make sure we focus on our priorities with an equity lens. We need to make sure we use those funds for those in need, for those who are significantly behind, and those who have to complete unfinished learning. When we're done in 3 years, we need to be able to walk away with something we've built that is sustainable and has a long-lasting impact on teaching, learning, and equity. So, I believe that we need to take our time when we build the plan, and we're going to learn, and we just need to make sure we spend those funds where they're needed the most. But there is no real rush. We have 3 years to do this right. But we do need to think about how we land. We just can't come to a screeching halt at the end of the 3 years. We have to figure out how we wind up and then how we wind back down. So this slide just gives you the timelines of when the funds are required to be obligated. So the chart depicts the availability of annual state funding, federal funding, and stimulus funding. And all of the ESSERs can go back to March 13 when the pandemic began. And again, it'll go through part of school year 2025. Basically that's 3 school years and 3 summers. And so ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, again, the House prevailed when it limited how ESSER 2 funds can be allocated. ESSER 2 was signed 27 December, and I will have to say that we still haven't received the funding. From what I hear is we should be getting a workshop pretty soon, a webinar to kind of give more direction on how to do that. Department of Education was ready to send that money out. But when they saw that the House was taking a look at writing things into the bill, they had to stop and wait and pull back, unfortunately. So we're still waiting for the funding, but you can see that there's several categories that we have to spend funding in. And then ESSER 3, that was actually signed March 11th, and we still haven't received any funds from the state. But my understanding is that that should come, you know, it's not going to come this year, but next year, very close behind the ESSER 2 is my understanding.
Ms. Lisinski, if I can chime in here as well, and I believe the board is aware of this, but just for the community's information, you know, everyone's wondering, well, what are you doing with these funds, and are we going to realize the impact this year? We have not received any of ESSER 2 funding. We have received some suggested direction from the state via the legislature, but we've not received the first formal instructions of how to submit the plan, what will be required, and so on. So we've not received the funds. We're awaiting direction from DOE on ESSER number 2. Interestingly, ESSER number 3, although approved back in January or February, I believe, would you say March 11th?
March 11th.
We have not heard one reference to ESSER 3 from the state since it was approved by the federal government. And it's interesting because by my reading of the guidelines from the feds, states have 60 days from the time they receive funds to distribute them to the LEAs, the local education agency. We have confirmed that the state received 2/3 of the ESSER 3 funds early April. So we're on the verge of hitting the 60 days, and we haven't been given any direction from the state. So it's just, people are going to be getting antsy, wondering what we're doing with and how we're allocating the funds. We have a plan for ESSER number 2. We provided that to the board previously, but we've not received any of the funds. So we'll keep you apprised. But for our community's benefit, I want them to understand you haven't heard announcements or discussion on ESSER 2 or ESSER 3 at length because we've not received funds or direction on how those are to be submitted to the state for approval.
Dr. Mullins, can I just ask, Ms. Lisinski, did you say it would be next year before we got the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds, you thought?
Next fiscal year. So
okay, so after July?
After June 30th.
Okay.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we were talking next calendar year, next school year, next...
No, I should have clarified next school year.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
We've gotten some indication from inquiries that ESSER 3 could be months away. So I don't know what that means, but that's what has been suggested.
Okay, and these are the challenges that we face, 22, 23. And actually, we talked about all of these, and they're all very real. So that bottom line is, we need to make sure that we reinforce how we spend our funds and make sure that we gain the value, the full value for what we are purchasing, how we're using those dollars from every dollar that we spend. So when I say discipline, I just mean, if you don't need that extra thing, you just need to buy what's affordable. You don't have to have all the whistles and those kind of things. So but we have to really realize that every dollar we spend could be going to something else. So we need to make sure that we really think through the requirements and if they're really needed. Okay, this slide is my shot at trying to show this as a visual. You can see that we were held harmless in 2021, and that was huge. But then, there's that cliff there. And then because we had those classroom savings, we were able to fill in that gap for next year. However, we really do need to have an increase in revenue, and we need to get that slope going higher in order to get back on track. And so that's what we need to do in order to get through the next 3 years. We don't want to count on ESSER funds. We want to be able to use the ESSER funds for, great things for kids. If we have to, we will, but we really need to work on our enrollment. And again, if we can't get the enrollment to where we would like it to be, we would have to start taking a look at reducing our footprint and accept where we are. So, but we have 3 years.
Ms. Lisinski, if I can jump in there, and this is where our anticipation of ESSER funds and our plan to sustain our workforce and really sustain our educational programs for our kids over the next 3 years are a bit in the balance. The great news is we have a plan for this year, but we also have a tentative plan for the next 2 fiscal years or 2 school years as well, because ESSER funds, by their allowances, provide for workforce stability. So it is our anticipation that we will use ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 to sustain workforce or meet that loss of revenue due to enrollment gap for not only this coming year, but for 2 more years that allow us the time we need to recover from the enrollment hit that we experienced this year. So we've talked, I've suggested that as uncertain as our projections are for next year, not just for Brevard, but across the state, everybody is doing their best to try and assess exactly where things are going to land. But by October, when we do our official FTE, we've gotten through the school year, or the start of the school year, 6-day count. We see what our enrollment recovery is trending towards. Will provide us, as well as hopefully by then we'll have further clarification and direction with ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. We'll be able to solidify those plans for the next subsequent 2 fiscal years as well. And so we feel very fortunate to have the federal funding to do what I believe is intended to do, and that is to provide the stability to school districts as they rebuild, respond to our kids and the needs that they're going to have academically to both make up lost learning opportunity, but also continue to excel moving forward and not hold any kid back because we're facing other funding challenges that may take opportunities and programs away from them. So just want to clarify, we're optimistic that we've got a reasonable and responsible plan for the next 3 years, and it will become increasingly formalized as we get more direction and information from the state.
Okay, the next steps. So we did do the budget analysis for reductions and cuts, so that's done. We are looking at the fund balance right now, and our intention is to come back in probably in a week or two to give you a early projection of what we think that may be. And then ongoing academic support and acceleration plans, and the working enrollment analysis and enrollment marketing plan. All those things are still ongoing. Is there any questions on this one? And then this is the budget adoption timeline. And this is a sneak peek at the cover of our first ever popular annual financial report. So that will be coming soon.
I have a copy in my backpack.
Nuh-uh.
I do. A draft. I may let you look at it.
So are there any questions?
Board members have questions for Ms. Lisinski?
I have one, but I don't know if anybody can answer. So I have one. Thank you very much. It's very detailed, and I appreciate that. It's depressing, but it is what it is right now. But with the ESSER funds, is there any consequences for our legislatures if they don't give us the money in a timely way? Do we know that? Is there anything that we can do to speed up the process to get these funds?
I don't know that we know that there's any consequences. I think some of you are attending the FSBA, and I'll be attending FAD's conference in a couple weeks, and I suspect it'll be a popular topic of discussion. Jim Hamilton is usually there, and he is a valuable source for funding and so on. I'm looking forward to sitting with him and talk through what some of his suggestions are, or what they're hearing, and then, of course, talk with other superintendents as well as FAD's leadership on how do we garner response and or information from the state. So, but I can't,
Okay.
I'm not sure what the consequences could be or will be.
Anybody else have questions? Ms. Campbell?
Yes, thank you. So I just going through some of the things you shared with us. So it looks like even though we have that base student allocation, I remember watching some of the House committee meetings, Senate committee meetings. It looks like they're moving money from categoricals more into the BSA, which is more flexible, which is honestly what we've been asking for a long time. But at the same time, we weren't anticipating them then cutting certain categoricals. So it kind of offsets, right? I was trying to follow like which one's offset, but it's not a complete reduction all the way down to nothing, but it's definitely a reduction of our overall funding per student, even though the BSA went up, correct?
Right. The terminology I kind of like to use is that those other mandates are crowding out our use of discretionary funds.
Right. Do you know, I don't know, this is one of you guys, when the date that the governor has to sign the budget, is it June 30th or is it a certain number of days past when they, because I know last year he had a certain number of days from when they gave it to him, and they didn't give it to him for a long time on purpose, but does he have all the way till June 30th, or does he have a certain number of days after it's passed?
He has a certain number of days after he receives it.
Do you know if he's received it?
I don't know.
Okay, so that would be, because I know all of that is going to be, one of the things that's included in that, in the budget, it may have been in the back of the bill part, was the bonuses that he's projecting for first responders and for teachers and principals. And I know if they're going to do that for the people who are, I know we haven't heard about that yet, for the people who are currently employed for this fiscal year and not next fiscal year, in order to get those checks out, we don't know how that's going to happen either. He kind of needs to do that in a timely fashion, but I know we haven't heard anything, but I was just wondering what's the date. So we need to find out if he's received it yet, so we kind of have an idea when it might be. I just, the reduction of the reserve units and the vacancies, and thank you for pointing that reduces our lapse. I think that's some of what the gentleman in the back and their organization have been asking for us to do for a long time, reducing that lapse, because that we carry over so much every year, and so definitely we're doing that by reducing those vacancies in the reserve units. And I appreciate the staff who have worked to make that happen. I wanted to just bring out one point. This is definitely something to look for in the future, not for this year's budget. But when last week, when the legislature came back together to discuss and vote on the compact with the Seminole tribe, the gaming compact, one of the things that was discussed is what are we going to do, assuming that it gets also is approved by the Department of the Interior. That's the next step. The governor has to sign it and then has to go to the Department of the Interior. That's going to generate approximately, their estimates, $500 million a year for the state. And one of the things that people were asking was, can you go ahead and lay out where that funding would go to? Would it go towards healthcare? Would it go towards education? And the Senate President Simpson, one of the things that he mentioned was when we go into the future, he talked about the minimum wage requirement. And he said, thinking about that the state is going to have a shortfall or extra expenditures of the minimum wage for the people who are employees of the state. But he also mentioned employees of state-sponsored organizations, which I would assume would be the school districts in the state of Florida. So it might not hurt to start having those conversations. In fact, I've been thinking about sending him personally an email myself, just saying, hey, I thank you for thinking of that. And when you have those conversations, please think about us as well, because although this year our bump to $10 an hour, I don't think that it was a relatively low number, but as we go up higher to $11, $12, and over the next 5 years all up to $15, that's going to be a significant increase. And so if, as the state decides they won't do it till next legislative season, but as they do that, it would be important, I think, to communicate to them, hey, as you're looking at those dollars, we are one of the organizations that's going to need extra funding to meet the required minimum wage increase. So just want to put that out there. I think he said it, and it was just in a press conference, but I heard him say it a couple different times, so I think it would be important to push that button and go forward with that, say, hey, yes, you're absolutely right. Let's consider that for us as well, as you guys think about what to do with that $500 million a year, assuming that it all gets passed.
Thanks, Ms. Campbell. I think that's a great point. Unfortunately, they tend to exclude schools from state-sponsored organizations when it's convenient to do so, but I'm right there with you that we should definitely have the conversation. Ms. Jenkins, you have anything?
Yeah. So, Ms. Campbell, I love that idea. I think it's a really, really great idea to reach out. I think it's important for us when we do have that conversation to make sure we follow up with the future and saying, if this does happen for us, let's ensure that it doesn't affect anything else going forward. Kind of like the lottery did. We had promises of the lottery money. We had a cake with icing on top. They started taking out the flour, the eggs, the sugar, and all we were left was with that icing. So I think it's important that it, in the long run, does benefit us. I also wanted to kind of talk about something you brought up, the governor's $1,000 bonus. I had the pleasure of attending a press conference in Satellite Beach when he was here, and he was announcing the $1,000 bonuses for first responders and specifically police officers that day. And ironically, it was Teacher Appreciation Week. And so I butted in and asked him, what about our teachers? Because he didn't use that word. And he told me, yeah, it's in there, it passed. But we're not announcing it today. He also said maybe he'd come to Brevard and announce it. So I called Mr. Randy Fine, who was there as well, and asked him to advocate on behalf of Brevard Public Schools to invite the governor to come to one of our schools and make sure that all of our educators and our administrators across the state are aware that that money is coming. So hopefully they will get back to us. Aside from that, I just kind of want to bring something up to the rest of my board members. I've had this conversation with Dr. Mullins probably too many times. He probably doesn't want to talk to me anymore. And I understand that we are facing a shortfall, and I understand that we haven't received ESSER funds yet, but I think it's really important for us to start having a conversation about how we're going to reward our staff members for the most difficult year and a half of their lives. We talk about sustaining our workforce, we talk about sustaining educational programs, but we're not going to be able to increase our enrollment or attract enrollment back to our schools if our classrooms are without teachers, if we don't have substitutes to fill those vacancies. It's not going to be as attractive for people to come back. So I think it's really important for us to really pay attention to that. Pay attention to that we need those people to show up to work every single day in order for us to achieve the goals that we have. I'm not going to say a number, but I had a number that I threw at Dr. Mullins. But one of the things that I had asked him was, you know, I think it would be really wonderful, and I know we're close now, but I thought it was going to be wonderful if we could announce to our staff something before the end of the school year. Maybe not in their bank account by any means, but for them to know that it's coming. While they're going on this break, kind of recharging, looking forward to coming back to the new year, just to give them a little, we have some money coming in with this ESSER funds. The next 3 years are going to be difficult for salaries. While we have the money, we want to acknowledge that we want to reward you for being here, for sticking with us, for coming back next year. We appreciate you. And I really think it's important that it goes across the board to all of our staff. Every single part of Brevard Public Schools had a difficult year and a half. And again, I just kind of wanted to bring it to your awareness because obviously I didn't talk to you guys about it, but just for you guys to mull that over a little bit. Thanks. And thank you, Ms. Listen.
Thanks, Ms. Jenkins. Ms. Lisinski, I have a couple off-the-wall well, not really off-the-wall, but there are things that really just dig at me. So on slide 8, you talked about the district cost differential, and we have the information on that slide about the impact to individual student funding. But do you know how much we lost with the district cost differential overall?
I'm looking at Karen now. Right. But yeah, so that did increase.
So we actually received additional dollars in the calculation of the district cost differential instead of losing dollars?
Yes, that's why you'll see that we went up to that almost $55.
Okay.
So it went up slightly. You can see the fourth calc to the first calc.
Okay. So do you know how much overall we got, like total?
I think we have that.
Ms. Belford, are you asking what it is before we go through the cost differential?
Yeah, so the district cost differential is a multiplier, right? And typically, because our multiplier is below 1, we lose funds. So previous years, it was like, I want to say it was like $8 million that was adjusted out with the district cost differential. So we increased, our multiplier went higher from 2020, 2021 to 21, 22, but we're still below the 1.
Yes, just a moment, I found the page.
Awesome.
It looks like it's just 4 million now. Let me double check my calculation.
Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot on that.
Yes, just over 4 million.
Okay. So, and you know, we've been having this conversation for some time, but I just think it's important to acknowledge that even though we've been having this conversation for quite a long time, we still are losing $4 million per year from our funding from the state. And oftentimes those dollars are going to districts that have higher taxable value and receive significantly more dollars than we do per student. So as we look at things going forward, I think that's a conversation that we need to continue to have. to request that they reconsider, and there was some movement on that, and then it got undone. So just really aggravates me that some of our lesser revenue generating districts are giving up dollars to places that have much more to do with. And then my other question on the amount raised in property tax, in previous years, they've rolled back our tax rate. So we didn't see any increase associated with property value with the exception of new construction. Are they doing the same thing this year, allowing us to have the construction increase but not property value increase?
I have to have Karen probably help me out, but I know that they're not going to do the rollback this year.
Okay, so they're actually allowing us to see then the property value increase there?
That's my understanding. That was what was written in the bill.
Okay, perfect. And then,
If you look back, my slides aren't numbered, it's probably slide 9, I believe.
yeah,
It shows the local funding. Fourth Calc 21 was 207.86 million, and for 22, it's projected 217.11 million.
And again, we'll get an update at June 1st to see if it increases at all.
okay, perfect. Another one, and I know the answer to this, but I just want to keep us all focused. Unemployment. So we, thankfully, to the work of the team, that number has decreased significantly from our initial discussion, right? But, and for anyone who's just coming up to speed on the issue that may be watching or go back and watch this at some point, there was a snafu in the unemployment system, and our unemployment claims skyrocketed from previous years. I know that the state is aware of the issue, but I just want to publicly acknowledge that they are not doing anything to correct the overpayment of unemployment compensation by the school district, correct? So what they're doing is providing us credits for years going forward, and the current amount of credits that we have would cover approximately a decade of unemployment claims on an average year. Is that correct?
I can't answer that one.
Yeah, that's Dr. Thetti's world, but you are correct. That
Okay.
Our annual unemployment claim costs averaged $50,000 to $75,000 a year, if I'm remembering correctly. So approaching $500,000 is nearly 10 times what it normally is. And so the state only issues us a credit in years forward for unemployment claims. So we will have credits into the next several years.
And so the state has those dollars and probably is making interest on it, as well as, not giving us our dollars back. So I just think that needs to be said.
The other question that you had, Ms. Belford, about the governor signing the budget, I'm sorry, unless it was Ms. Campbell, it is not on his desk yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
And then does he have, and is it 30 days? How many days does he have?
I have something from Rick Collins when he was here helping us last year. He says it's 15 days, but it still has not hit his desk.
15 days. Okay, thank you.
All right, that's all I have. Are there any additional questions? All right, thank you so much, Ms. Lisinski. We appreciate your thoroughness and your eagle-eye focus on students and doing all of this work for us.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mullins, do you have anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
All right. Hearing nothing else, then this meeting is adjourned.